Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mondays with Mover. I am Virtual Mover, cwlemoine, author of the Spectre series and the Alex Shepard series. If you like aviation, military espionage thrillers, please pick up a Spectre book. It helps support the channel. FINI Flight is the latest book. You might enjoy it. Today's episode, it's been a while, but DCS is back. And today I thought I would do a FAM flight in the F-5, which will be one of the first times of me flying it. I just got the system set up. Not really planning on doing any real big virtual multiplayer or anything like that, but we do have a lot of exciting things planned in the future with DCS. So since I'm flying the T-38, I thought I might do a quick little F-5 flight and see how it compares in DCS. So this is not a tutorial, it's not instructional. I've never flown the F-5. But I thought it'd be cool just to compare it and kind of talk through what I'm thinking about, you know, when I look at a new airplane and go fly it, kind of like we did with the T-38 video. And since I can't give you T-38 content anymore, I thought this would be the next best thing. So hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks for watching. All right, so starting off, getting into the F-5, it looks a lot like the T-38A, which is what I'm currently flying. It's all analog gauges. You can see here, airspeed indicator is exactly like the T-38. ADI is actually here where the radar is. There's no radar on the T-38. There's no HUD, although this is really not much of a HUD. Altimeter, HSI, and then that's all moved over, and then the standby ADI, all that stuff, it's just rearranged, so the cross-check's a little bit different. VVI is over here on the right, the G-meter is actually over here on the left. There's no AOA T-38, and there's obviously no RWR or any of that stuff. Gauges are pretty much the same. You got the RPM, or the TAC, EGT, nozzles. Fuel flow is a little bit different, and the fuel quantity is obviously different. Oil pressure and cabin altimeter is all just a little bit different. So what I usually do getting into the aircraft, before I even get in, is actually I do my cockpit sweep. As I'm putting my helmet on the rail and doing all that stuff, I come over here. There's actually 3 guarded switches right here that the landing gear doors, which I guess on the F-5 are automatic. The ADI, which I don't know that there was a power switch for that here, and then emergency flap switch, which the F-5's got auto flaps, which you can see right there, and it's also got a little auto flap switch, so that's a little bit different as well. But I'll make sure that the flaps are engaged, and then left to right, that's where you stick your pins for your ejection seat. I make sure that the guarded switches for the fuel cutoff are in the up position, so on. Landing lights off. None of this exists on the T-38, and I would go ahead and set up my radio for whatever frequency we're fighting on. We got 2 radios, one in the back, one in the front, and then I would set up my TACAN for what I'm fighting. I don't actually, we're at Dreamland. I don't know what the TACAN is here, but whatever, we don't need it. And anyway, continuing on, the fuel boost pumps would actually already be on. Those usually just stay on, and then the generators would also both be on. So getting in the jet, I do a quick oxygen quantity check, turn the battery switch on, and then check the lights. I do this over the rail too because it's a lot easier to change the bulb without being in the airplane, so if there's something out or something like that. But obviously you can't hear the warning tone, so you're going to have to do that again. But I also do the fuel quantity check and gauge test to make sure that the gauges move, because sometimes they stick, and also I get a light on at a liter, and then I'll get the actual test to get the quantities. And that's pretty much it. So getting in the airplane, I've already done the check since I'm already sitting in the airplane, and they would have already had air connected, so I tell the ground crew, connect the ground air supply, which it's already going to be connected. So the next thing I would do is give them the hand signal to go ahead and connect it for the #1 engine. So it'd be ground crew here, ground air supply, and then apply. So now I'm watching on the T-38. It's a little bit higher RPM, but right on the F-5 manual, it's 10% minimum, so we've got that. And then hit the left start button. Left side gauges come alive, and then from there, throttle over the horn, watching the EGT, we've got fuel flow indications and making sure the EGT doesn't rise too high here, and then waiting as the engine comes online, making sure that that generator kicks in and we've got a good crossover. The F-5's also got aux intake doors, that's what it's supposed to look like when the generator's online. So anyway, that's a good start there. Then I would give him the hand signal to switch, and can't do that visually because there's nobody out there, but I go ground crew, ground air supply, apply again.
Apply ground air supply.
And
copy. Air is now applied.
Air's applied. It's going to go greater than 10%. Mash the button. Give him the number 2 signal. And we're coming over the horn. Again, watching EGT, fuel flow indications, and watching the engine spool up. Make sure we've got obviously good oil pressure too. Looks like it's a little bit higher for the generator cut-in speed on the F-5, which is no big deal. Just different engines, a little bit more thrust. Okay, once that's done, again, it would be all hand signals. I go to the ground crew, tell them to go ahead and disconnect the ground air supply, because there's no APU or anything like that. And then again, left to right, I come over here. I go yaw damper on. This has got a pitch damper, which is different as well, and then throttle gates engaged, which I don't think this thing has a throttle gate. I haven't found out a way to do that yet. Throttle gate engaged, and then I start with my trim check. So in the T38A, I would trim and just make sure it cuts off, which it does. Well, there's no pitch trim, so there's a takeoff trim button down right here where the radar control would be. I'd hit the takeoff trim, takeoff trim, left, right, make sure the trim moves, and then same thing, I would go forward with him looking, look back, make sure I got flight control movements, do the trim, cut off, and then back, trim forward, cut off, left, right, rudder left, rudder right, and then he'll give me a speed brake, centered up, that'll close the speed brake, and then from there, the flaps are already up, so we are going to step the flaps down first to 60. So I'm watching the stab, making sure the stab's moving as the flaps are moving. That should put them in fixed. And then I go to the other side. Some guys like to use the mirrors and then make sure that they go to full, which they do. And I guess for the F-5, that should be in auto there. Once that's done, there we go. I don't think they take off in fixed. I think they take off in just auto. At least that's what I read. So up, fixed, and then full is auto. So leave it in full, but real jet, or at least T38 land, I would take off in 60 flaps. I don't know how to uncage with these little magic hands, so that's going to have to stay there. And again, I don't know the tack hand stuff. So here I already have the ATIS and clearance. He'd come around and do a pitot heat check, and after he does that, I check the generator for crossover. So left generator off, that's good, no lights. Right generator off, that should be the only light I see. That works out great. And then from there, he'll pull chocks. So I want to make sure my seat is run up. I like to run seat high enough that I can just barely see the pitot, the tip of the pitot, a couple stripes on the pitot boom. But again, this is an F-5, so it's got a little bit different of a nose. And then we'll do a quick forward. He's going to check the tires, roll over, stop, and then once he's done, he or she will go stand out in front and wait for taxi clearance. So I've already got clearance simulated. I've already got ATIS. We're just going to run what we have. 4,400 feet is the field elevation, so we use a 6,000 foot pattern altitude. I'm not going to mess with the transponder, but that's the exact same transponder as the T38, although they did get a contract for a new one that fits that exact same size, and it looks like a little mini MFD, but it has zero functionality other than transponder, which kind of sucks. I think they would put some kind of ADS-B or something in there, but anyway. So once that's done, it'd be we'll use race 1 call sign. Race 1 taxi single from, I don't know, Dreamland ramp with ATIS and clearance, and I'd give the crew chief the let's go, and we're off. So coming out, I go left, right, check the brakes, make sure the brakes work. They do, and we're off to the races. So I'd have my lineup card here at this point. We're going straight. I would do a quick flight control check. So back, up, left, right, rudder left, rudder right, and then stir the pot. Make sure the flight controls are free and correct. Flaps are set. Told review. See, 145 is the approximate rotation here, I guess, on the F-5. So use about 170 for single engine takeoff speed, hot density altitude, so looking for about 180, which is what I have bugged for CDOS plus 10. So that means if we lose an engine, we'll try to accelerate down to 180 knots. All right, and approaching number 1, I would make sure the seat's already armed, but if I haven't armed it, I'd probably arm it once I'm clear of anything that I can hit if I jump out, but it's not a 0-0 seat, but it looks like my seat is armed, the pins are removed, and I call tower and number 1, race 1, number 1. They give me race 1, clear for takeoff, fly runway heading. Check that final's clear. Okay, at this point, because it's an F5, I'll raise the nose. You can leave it down, but it adds, I think, like 10% or something like that. All right, canopy closed, lock lights out. Get a run up, looks good in middle, and now we're in blower, 2 good swings, looking at the nozzles there. And 100 knots go for tires. That means basically if we blow a tire, we're going to continue. 145, there's liftoff. Gears coming up. That just took me a minute to find the switch here with VR programmed on the throttle. Climbing out. And as we hit 300, we'll cancel afterburner. Flaps are tracking up. Climbing out, we'll just go runway heading. Once we hit 10, we'll try to climb at 300, which I'm not doing a very good job in. It's all about trim in this airplane. I've left the HUD off. We're not going to need it for today. Once we hit 10,000 feet, we'll make a left-hand turn and turn back around. Punch off that master caution here. All right, there's 10,000 feet. Go ahead and start the left-hand turn and accelerate to 350 knots. And we'll climb. So the game plan will be, I'll show you a G warm-up, and then after we do a G warm-up, we'll do aerobatics, we'll do a brake turn, and then high-speed, low-speed maneuverability demo, and then come back for the overhead pattern, do a couple patterns, and call it a day. So just a fam flight, get used to the airplane. Passing 10,000 feet, we checked that the cabin's pressurizing. We can see there, we'll do an ops check, and you can see got a little bit of a fuel imbalance, so I'll split the throttles. Oop, still trimmed up for 330 there. fuel imbalance. So I'm going to split the throttles and try to get that back in within limits. We could cross feed because it looks pretty significant, but I'm going to leave it there. And we're climbing up to at least 16,000 feet. Gotta love these visuals. I mean, it really feels like I'm sitting in an airplane. Alright, there's 16,000 feet, and push over for knots there. Alright, at least 400 knots. Looking for about 420. Trim, trim, trim. And then 420, we'll go left, so back to heading west, or sorry, east. And we're rolling and setting 4 Gs. So in the jet, it would be G-suit inflation, but obviously I can't feel that, so I got to eyeball the G meter, holding 4 to 4.5 Gs. Using my bank to set my lift vector to maintain that. Obviously you can't see 420, so it's kind of just a wag there. And there's that. I checked the Gs. Yep, 5 Gs, so a little bit high, but not too bad. So first turn checks your system, make sure that's working, and then once we're ready, we're going to punch that off and come back the opposite direction. So more over rotate this time. There's 5.5 Gs right there. I'm holding that. I'm a little fast, so using angle of bank and lift vector as required. So now I'm getting a little slow. Oh, the canopy fog, that's cool. Oop, and I overshot it looking at the canopy. Anyway, so that's that. I checked the G meter. Nope, didn't over G. And there. So first thing we're going to do, since we're already at 400 knots, I'll show you a quick brake turn. So situation here, either somebody's behind you or you're doing like a turn circle entry. So smooth pull, 4 to 4.5 Gs, G-suit inflation, and then smoothly blending into that 5.5 to 6 Gs. Full afterburner, trying to maintain your airspeed, but you can bleed down 380. Is good for the T-38 down to 350, but then you can use it as required if you need to tighten down. For example, if your opponent's nose on, or if you need to take a shot of opportunity. So it's just a matter of changing your lift vector if you need to go up or if you need to go down. And then once you come out of afterburner, now with the F-5, it's got leading edge flaps, so you're tightening down your turn radius, losing a little bit of rate, and cashing it all in here. So you can see here as well, as far as your maneuverability under high AOA, the aircraft's starting to stall, but you've got no aileron effectiveness. The ailerons really don't do anything in high alpha, but if you want to get the aircraft to turn, now you're using full right rudder, gets the aircraft going to the right, and then full left rudder will get you going. Not to you can actually do a rudder roll and snap the aircraft. So it's just a demonstration to show, look, that your aircraft is more effective. High AOA, your rudder's more effective. Low AOA, your ailerons are more effective. But you can see we're getting a little bit low. In real life, I would have set a floor, would not have gone this low, especially with mountainous terrain, because in the event you depart, with 15,000 foot uncontrolled ejection altitude. But anyway, resetting off of that, split the throttles, trying to get rid of that fuel imbalance, and setting up for the next thing here. Now we'll go ahead, unload, get our airspeed back, light the afterburner, and we'll do an Immelman. It's about 400 to 420-ish. 450 would be ideal, but anything over about 420 is pretty good, especially with the F-5 bigger motors. But full afterburner, pulling that blended 4 to 4.5 Gs. And looking over the top, finding the horizon, straightening the wings, and then as the canopy starts to hit the horizon, unload and slow roll, maintaining the airspeed there. And now that we're slow speed, we can roll right into a split S, well, a slice back. We can roll right into the slice back, and full afterburner will give us a pretty good rate around as long as we keep the AOA up. With the T-38 and less so with the F-5, if you're an afterburner and your nose is low, you can get your nose buried, and because it's a slick airplane and it accelerates fairly quickly. So, but that's it. We'll go ahead and knock it off. Split the throttles one more time. Try to get that fuel imbalance under control, and you can see the airports up ahead. And I will RTB. I checked my fuels, looking at that, 145 plus gas, looking at about 170 knots on final at 20 knots, so 190. And, you know, for me, I like 200 knots around the final turn. Just gives me a little bit of extra cushion, but, you know, no slower than 180 or so. So here I've got the airport in sight, and I'm looking for a 3 to 5 mile initial. It is not like a carrier brake that, you know, you'd come in at 800 feet, 350, 400 knots, whatever. The Air Force brake's a little bit, it's not as cool as the carrier brake. I mean, we're coming in 1,500 feet above the field, 300 knots. I'm a little slow. Push the power up a little bit and catch it. Actually, what catches my attention is the flaps. You can see the leading edge flap cycling and the switch cycling up there, and it's like, oh yeah, I need to add power. So, but the goal is over the numbers or a little bit past 300 knots. It's a level 180 degree turn, and just a smooth pull, slowing down to below gear speed. I stand up the throttles and trying to maintain spacing off the runway, because we're going to come perch here in a second. So you can see the runway, very easy to find. Gear horn, yeah, there's a little bit more drag, I think, in the sim than in the real jet. You wouldn't slow down that fast, but gear down, handle down 3 green, flaps are tracking, verified that the flaps, obviously. In the T-38, I like to use 60 flaps around the final turn and then roll to full if I'm doing a full stop, just because of the ejection envelope. Race 1, base gear, touch and go. So, in the final turn, there, like I said, about 200 knots, no slower than on speed, and that just keeps me in the envelope. And I'm just cross-checking airspeed and trying to find that wire. So I'm looking halfway down, halfway around, and as we start to roll out, I'm going to shift my aim point to the overrun, and that's when I'm going to start bringing the power back as I've got it made with, you know, less than about 20 or so degrees of bank. And now I'm just holding that aim point. Again, you know, I like a little bit fast on speed, maybe a little bit less on the AOA, couple knots fast, and then in the overrun here, shift the aim point, crack shift power flare, and hold it off, hold it off, hold it off, and there we go. We're going to touch down. Try to hold the nose off as best I can. I'm in afterburner, but only because my throttle here that I'm using doesn't have a detent, and it's hard to find the gear handle, so I'd go gear up a little bit faster than this. And now I'm accelerating down the runway, looking for 250 knots minimum, and making sure that the flaps have retracted, which they have. Obviously in a T-38 I would just retracted the flap. So race 1, request closed, touch and go. Closed approved, and now I'm pulling and rolling, trying to capture that 6,000 feet above, and just planning my downwind pattern, not to go too slow here, but just to roll out on downwind and below the gear speed here. So I calculate my fuel one more time. It's about the same. I'm getting a little slow, so I'm going to go ahead and throw the gear down and adjust the power as required. Watch the flaps. Flaps are tracking. I got handle down 3 green, and I'm looking at my spacing. It's looking pretty good, assessing the winds. It looks like it's pretty much the same as before, and again I'm going to try to mismatch the throttles, push the right one up just a little bit, try to get that fuel imbalance out as best I can. And then now I'm just looking for my perch position here. So I'm assessing, I'm kind of crabbing in a little bit, and I think that's just a spatial D. Race 1, base gear, touch and go. And then, you know, clear the option, clear touch and go, whatever. And now, same thing, you know, 45 degrees of bank, no more than 60, obviously, but, you know, 45 degrees of bank's a nice, comfortable position. And I'm looking to find that wire once again, projecting my aim point out where I'm going to be landing, or where I'm going to be shifting my aim point. It's really drug in compared to most aircraft. You know, if we had Pappies, it would be 3 green and 1, or 3 red and 1 white. But here I am, you know, aim point, airspeed starting to slow down as I cross the threshold, crack shift power flare. So I'm shifting that aim point, got the green donut, and we're going to just touch down right at the captain's bar. A little bit of a float, but holding off. Maybe a little bit early rotation here, and back up, and I'm trying to find the gear again. And this time we'll do a burner close just because why not. So holding it to the end of the runway, going to get about 300 knots. Flaps have tracked up, not going to overspeed those. They're in auto, and it'll be race 1, request closed, full stop. And there you go. Pull, roll out of AB because we don't want to overshoot too much. Which, 200 feet, I can roll back. Got a little slow. I don't want to really be into the beeper here. Saying it sounds a little different in a T-38, but got a little slow. We'll push power up. I've got too high and too slow, so that's my bad. But go ahead and throw the gear down and watch the flaps tracking through. Make sure I don't overspeed them. Calculate my speeds once more. We only burned a couple 100 pounds, so about 165. And just checking my pattern spacing. Now I went to the other side, so I'm a little low. No big deal. Now I'm looking for my perch position and fixing my pattern so I'm not too wide or too... Actually, I'm a little wide, but looking for the wingtip on. I want to make a 45. Race wear on base gear, stop. And now a little tight, but it's looking okay. The graphics in this thing are amazing. I mean, it's just incredible how this works out. So again, looking for that wire. About 200 knots. And the only difference here is I'm going to try to aero brake and stop. I mean, otherwise it's the same pattern, same speed, same everything. So there we go, 200 knots. Okay, now I'm rolling out. Got the field made. So I'm going to start decreasing the power. Not really going to idle, but just standing up the throttles, going a little closing throttle, and then now crack shift power. Got the AOA donut blinking. I'm going straight to idle in the overrun and touchdown right about there and into the aero brake. A little bit too much. Got a little bit of a bounce, but that's okay. And into the aero brake. You got to be careful with the F-5. Can't aero brake it like a T-38. The book says you'll scrape the tail if you go, I think, over 12 degrees. But usually you'd hold it off a little bit more than this. At least on the T-38 side, it doesn't. The F-5 seems to want to just drop the nose faster. I guess that's because of the leading edge extensions. I also don't have the nose strut extended, which you don't really need. So really long runway, and I'm just going to let it roll out because there's no reason to really get on the brakes because I'm passing the 7 board here, and I've got airspeed under control. So go to flaps to up, speed brakes out. If I had gear doors, I'd throw those open. And as soon as I'm comfortable, I'm going to go ahead and clear cold, slow down. I don't know if you have to do this in the F5, but I'm going to pop the ram dump and pop the canopy here and try to close this. And that's it. I'm not going to show all the shutdown stuff or do any of that, but I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I know it's not dogfighting or anything like that, but I figured just, you know, first flight, fam flight, just getting used to it. There is some exciting stuff on the horizon, one of which being Wags and I are going to do a series of videos with me flying the F-5 and him flying the Hornet on how to do basic BFM setups, just how we train, offensive, defensive, high aspect. No tactics or anything like that. I don't want to go to jail. Just some basic setups and how we, you know, professionally train, you know, for those of you that are trying to replicate this realistically as possible. And then also a really big announcement that I can't quite say just yet, but it's along the same lines. Remember last year I made a deal with you guys. If we got enough for Hurricane Michael, I was going to do a video. We've got another worthy cause for you to support. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.